Welcome everyone. I'm getting a little stir crazy. I've been in the home office here for a week now, 2 weeks. I don't even know how long it's been. So I need a little break. I need a little trip. So my good friend Charles McElwee is here from the Greater Hazleton Historical Society and Museum. He's also an editor at the City Journal. We're going to take a little trip back to the 1920s in Hazleton. Let me pause my music here, Charles. Getting in the mood, getting festive. Thank you for being with us today. And you were telling me we're going to have some fun, talk about the 20s, but before that, there was a similar situation in Hazleton to what we're in now. There was a Spanish flu. So how similar was that to what we're going through now?
The response is similar because the city was on lockdown. People were on quarantine, although it was at a far more dramatic and horrible scale. There were many deaths, many people ill. St. Gabriel's High School was turned into a hospital and then a morgue. Hazel Park had tents set up similar to Central Park, what we're seeing in New York. It was a disaster. And then, of course, fast forward over a decade to 1929 and the onset of the Depression. But in between that was this grand period for Hazleton. It was just more or less this economic boom that was reflective of the trends going on economically across the country. But when you drive around Hazleton right now, which of course not many people are doing and you shouldn't be doing, but if you are, you'll see the architectural legacy all around you. Basically, all the major landmarks in the city date to that 10-year period.
What really fueled that economically? I mean, everyone looks at Hazleton and thinks, okay, it's a coal town. And what was going to really drive that? Was it the coal?
Well, not only were we dealing with the 1918 flu before the next decade, but then we were recovering from World War I, which was awful. So, but economically, it was good for the Hazleton area because there was a demand for coal. So all that coal wealth was a driving force behind a lot of the buildings you see. So by 1923, 1924, there was this proposal to raise Ariel Pardee's mansion, who was the founding father of Hazleton, built the coal industry. And his house was on Broad Street between Church and Laurel and Green. For a public referendum, they voted to knock that down, and as a result, we have all the buildings we see today, from the Altamont Hotel to the Hazleton National Bank building. So that was one dramatic example. But then, in addition to that, later in the decade, you look up Wyoming Street and you see the castle. The castle was the first high school in Pennsylvania to cost over $1 million. And if you scan south, down Wyoming, toward the south side, you see St. Gabriel. St. Gabriel's third church was built in 1927. Yet again, this magnificent structure modeled on St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. But the point is, you were seeing all these buildings either rebuilt or built at this grand scale during that period, and it was reflective of the wealth that was in Hazleton at that time.
As a historian, I know we got these great buildings that helped move Hazleton forward. Were you a little sad they knocked down the Pardee Mansion? And what do we have pictures inside of it? Like, do people know what it was like?
There are pictures inside of it. And a lot of those archival photos are at a place called Blythewald in Rhode Island. And that's a whole other story, but long story short, that would have been Pardee's son-in-law, Augustus Van Wickle. He had this massive house on the coast of Rhode Island. It's now a museum, and it holds a lot of the Pardee archives. That's subject to debate, whether we would have been better off with Pardee's mansion or what we have now. When you look at the Altamont, you can argue we would have been better off with the mansion, but you have to judge the decision by the standards of the time. Hazleton was booming. There was a demand for growth. And those buildings served a purpose in the mid-1920s. So I think it would be hard to suggest, based on the decision at that point, that they would have kept the mansion, although that would have made a beautiful park, considering that some of the oldest trees in Hazleton were in that park. And they dated hundreds of years. And we do have photos of those trees, and are quite stunning.
So 1920s in Hazleton. I told you I just finished watching Boardwalk Empire not too long ago, a little bit about Prohibition. I mean, how much was Hazleton like that? I mean, are we talking about the Roaring Twenties? I mean, flappers, and it was Prohibition, I guess. Then what was Hazleton like?
Well, I think the question people would ask if they lived in Hazleton in the 1920s would be, what is Prohibition? It made no difference. It was just a party. And this is based on oral history. I don't know if it's true or not, but the source is pretty reliable. Jimmy Walker, he was mayor of New York in the 20s, and he was this larger than life figure, small guy, but big personality, big partier, defying the Roaring Twenties in New York City. And the rumor is that for a good time, he took the train to Hazleton and drank at the Winfield Hotel, which was which was in downtown Hazleton. Of course, it's gone now. But when I talk to people, a lot of these people are gone, almost all of them. But the best way to describe Hazleton in that period, I've been told, is the movie The Sting with Robert Redford. It's an early 1970s classic. And I'm told that that movie accurately captures what it felt like to be in Hazleton in that period. So it was just a big party.
And there had to be great entertainment. I mean, I'm sure there were some theaters or places, I guess, downtown to go back then and see some of this, some of the acts, some of the things coming in.
Exactly. So the Capitol Theater, which was considered Hazleton's most beautiful theater, and we had many theaters, that was built on Pardee Square, right where the house was. So that was that was bracketed by Hazleton National Bank and the Altamont, but in between was this Grand Theater. And we did have a Grand Theater. The Grand Theater was on Broad Street, of course, and the Feely, which was not only a place to watch talkies, as they were called, but to watch boxing matches. There were plenty of boxing matches. Cinderella Man, Braddock, right? Braddock was a commencement speaker at St. Gabriel's High School.
Thank you for joining us for this latest Hazleton historical segment. Charles, I appreciate it. Everyone at home, stay safe, and look up the Greater Hazleton Historical Society and Museum on Facebook for more information, and also check out their website, and you can make a donation to them as well.